Hello guys, welcome to a video about the differential in Assetto Corsa Competizione. I feel that the diff is one of those tricky topics that is kind of difficult to understand if you don't necessarily have a background in engineering of vehicles or something like that, or perhaps everything is new to you and it's difficult to figure out what change does what and so on. The differential can be kind of subtle, but it can also be a very powerful tool in making sure the car is safe or quick or a combination of that. So first of all, what is a differential? Right, so it's the thing that is in between because this car is rear wheel driven, we have a differential in between the rear tires, the rear wheels. And what it does is that it allows the outer wheel to rotate faster than the inside wheel, or simplified, actually, just different rotation speeds of the two different rear wheels. But what we also have is that we have a limited slip differential, which means that we can actually we can control the amount of differential, like the diff in between. I should say the difference in rotation speed in between the two tires. So I'm gonna show it later on, but if you look in the mechanical grip section of, I think it's the mechanical grip section. Well, anyway, where you find the differential in the setup screen, you can see that you can apply different amounts of torque, basically. So what the diff does is that it pre-tensions a mechanism, so you control the amount of different velocity that you have in between the two rear wheels. So think of it as a spring, kind of. Like, the stiffer it is, the harder it is to have a difference in the amount of rotation on the inside and the outside wheel as you go through corners. So what happens when you go through a corner, especially a slow corner, you will have quite a big difference in terms of rotation speed on the inside wheel in comparison to the outside wheel, because obviously the outside wheel travels a longer distance than the inside wheel. We're gonna have to have a higher rotation speed there because the car only has one velocity, like it's only going at one speed. So what happens in a corner is quite straightforward in a sense, because the outside tire has to go a longer route. It has to also rotate faster than the inside wheel, and the differential allows for that. But there are some cases where we don't want to have too much of a difference. So what the differential does to the vehicle is twofold, mainly two areas that it affects. One of them is the traction coming out of corners and so on, and one of them is yaw moment related. And now you're wondering, what is yaw moment? What does that mean? And I'll get back to that. Well, so let's start with the traction part. So what happens if you have no diff, basically, if you have an open diff? One thing that is quite obvious in physics is that the power from the engine will take the path of least resistance, kind of. So if we have no differential, basically no diff locking, so no resistance, we basically will spin one of the tires but not the other one. So if I come out of the corner and rotate, well, I spin up the rear wheels. If my differential is completely open, no restriction, one tire, the one with least resistance, basically will spin up, or quite close to that in a sense. But there will obviously, since you don't have zero resistance on one tire, both of them will spin to some extent. But you will be you will favor one tire more than the other. And that is mainly because, like, going through a left-hand corner, we have more weight on the outside tire and so on. And you see I drift quite a bit. So what happens if you're trying to come out of a slow corner and one of the tires spin up completely, taking all the power with it, and the other one doesn't rotate at all? So first of all, the tire that doesn't rotate is going to still have, lateral grip, but the other one is going to waste all the engine torque, which means that you will not get anywhere because you're losing all to wheel spin, losing all power to wheel spin. But the thing is that the car won't slide as much, you won't drift as much in a sense, because you still have one tire keeping you keeping you concentrated kind of sideways. So you will have lateral acceleration in one of the tires. And this is why a lot of people go for quite a low differential setting, because it helps coming out of, like, for instance, this corner. It helps with not getting the rear end to step out too much. So on the other hand, if we have too stiff of a diff, what will happen then? So if you have bad throttle application, you'll start to lose grip because you put too much torque in the wheels. And if one tire starts losing the grip, since it will basically drag the other wheel with it, both of the tires will start to lose traction. So now you're putting down power into both of the tires, both of the wheels, but both of them are also losing grip. So you're distributing the torque from the engine in a nicer way, making sure that you use all of the grip available, kinda. But you will also lose the back end of the car because it will step out when you have a stiffer diff. And obviously, the complete opposite of having a completely open diff, don't mind my lines here, the opposite of having an open diff is a completely fixed diff, which will force the tires to rotate at the same speed, meaning that going just through this corner here will be a shit show, because you will basically, if you go at 1 kilometers an hour, the wheels will be spinning. The inside wheel will be dragged forwards, and the outside wheel will be oh, sorry, how does it, yeah. Exactly. The inside wheel will spin forwards and the outside wheel will be dragged around, because well, that's how that works. Let's not get into that too much. Just complicating things. So instead of having one tire not spinning and keeping the lateral grip, we'll have both tires spinning and using all the grip, which means that we have no control sideways, which means that the rear will step out much easier. The thing is, though, if you have an open diff, let's say coming out of this last corner here, all the power will go to the outside wheel at first, because it rotates at a higher velocity. So it's easy to spin it up, not spin up as in lose traction, but just spin it. But if you have a little bit more power going to the inside wheel, you can use that as leverage to get out of the corner in a quicker way. The car will feel more agile coming out of a slow corner. So if you've ever driven a vehicle that feels like you go into the throttle and it doesn't get anywhere, like it just sits there, like you don't spin your tires, and like you hear the engine revving up kind of, but it just like doesn't get anywhere. If you stiffen up the diff then to some extent, that might help that a little bit, so it will feel more agile. But it will, and also you will use the tires, both of the tires, instead of more like the one. But you will have a more difficult time controlling the rear axle of the vehicle. So instead, let's get into the second part about yaw moment. So first of all, what is yaw? Yaw is the rotation around the vertical axis. So when we go around, unless we're going around Suzuka, which is a figure of 8, for all the other tracks, as far as I know, in this game, you do 360 degrees of rotation, either left or right, around your car, which is yaw. So when you steer into a corner, you lean outwards, that's roll. When you go on the brakes or accelerate, that's pitch, back and forth. And yaw is the rotation of the vehicle like this. So yaw moment then is either, well, it's a rotational force that either sends you rotating more, or a resisting force that when you turn into a corner, if you have a resisting yaw moment, it will slow down the rotation of the vehicle. And the differential is one of those, because if you think about it, when you steer into a corner, any type of corner, to some extent, the rear wheels will try to rotate at different speeds. Alright? And the differential resists that motion. So we will use up grip to make sure that the car doesn't rotate as much as we would like. So when do we want to limit the amount of rotation into a corner we have then? shouldn't you do that with like camber and so on, and like work with spring stiffness and dampers and like wheel alignment and stuff like that? Well, yes, but if you look at this car, for instance, the Bentley around Spa here, now I've taken a setup that I like, and I have half the amount of differential. So I've gone from 100 Newton meters down to 50, which means that there is rotation, and I can manage the rear end if I'm not focusing on talking to you guys. But for some corners, it is less stable. And I'm going to show you that when I get to that in a second. But before we get to that, I'm going to show you here in these corners here. So on a low differential, in these kind of low speed corners, it will feel like the car is kind of, it wants to rotate around. We have no issues with too little rotation going through those corners there. Piff puff, what are they called? I'm not so sure. But in low speed corners, if you have too high of a differential, it will feel like the car doesn't really want to rotate. It will feel like it's resisting. A little bit like if you have too much camber on the rear axle, but the camber also gives you lateral acceleration, which the differential does not. So looking at Blanchimo here, when I steer in here, now we managed, and I did it a little bit violently, but sometimes going through Blanchimo, the Bentley doesn't like to stay on the road anymore. So it just rotates on itself. It goes around like that. So again, I have no issues going through these slow corners because of the yaw moment that the differential gives. But there are some issues so we don't want to increase the differential because it might limit our motion, but we might want to limit the motion because, like, in some places like here. Oh shit. Yeah. So me not being too careful, but you saw how the car was like wibble wobbling, going around like that. Slightly uncontrolled. So, just to sum up what happened there. So, through the slow corners, like through the corners where we need rotation, no issues really to get rotation. But in the fast corners, where I cannot take away front end grip to get the balance to be more understeered, because I'm quite close to understeering too much around the entire track, apart from in Blanchimo and perhaps then over Radion. So what can I do then to not have this sudden Bentley situation where I just rotate? Well, we can work with the diff. So let's go in here. Let's have a look at the mechanical grip section. So as I said, I went down to 50. Let's go back up to 100. Let's not change anything else. So this is how my setup looks for that. Balance, 3.7 degrees camber on the front, 3.1 on the rear end, 14.8 caster. Aero balance is quite far forward, and dampers are not favoring a stable car in any way. So it's quite agile, this setup, but we've gone from 50 to 100 here. Now when I've increased the stiffness of the diff, what happens if I try to go out of the pit a little bit too excited? So I press full throttle. That is very easy to do if you go for a full diff, or like a more stiff diff in that type of slow corner. I mean, going out there is a slow corner. But when we start to lose grip, we lose grip on both the rear tires, like that. Okay? And around there as well. So remember that on the low differential setting, the car was controllable through the corners. It felt a little bit nervous, perhaps, in comparison to this one. But especially in the high-speed corners, it was quite undefined and difficult to understand. It was hard to, like, get the car, like, it was hard to know when to steer in and use the front end grip, because I was always afraid that the rear end was going to be a little bit too nervous and go around on me, as it then later on did coming over Radion. There again, you see the rear end stepping out because bad throttle control. I've driven the low diff setting. But through these corners, to some extent, it just feels calmer, because I have the diff working to calm down the rear end, and I can crank up the front end grip to get me through these corners. So yes, there is a bit more resistance, and now I'm not used to this, so I'm sending it a little bit on. So this corner will be trickier with a higher differential setting. It will be trickier to keep the rear end from stepping out a little bit on corner exit. But what will happen is that when we get up to Blanchimont here, I will have no issues just sending the car in, because it resists that yaw rotation. You even saw me actually going a little bit oversteer there into the corner. So out of turn 1, it's still manageable in terms of the grip in the low speed corners. And now it's like kind of the ultimate test. How stable is it over radio? Hitting the curb a little bit, car gets light, just settles down. So for some tracks like Spa, you might have to sacrifice a little bit of the low speed corner like exit stability, in terms of like in order to manage high speed stability. Another track that can have this issue is Silverstone. A little bit Cops, but especially Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel. If you carry a lot of speed in there, you're gonna have issues. If you have a little bit of a snappy car, you can also have issues at Paul Ricard. At the end of the long straight, when you turn into the corner there, you can have the rear end step around on you. See how aggressive line I could take there. And so in general, when you have these like turn in kind of quick corners where the aero doesn't really, like the aero just gives you rear end grip, but if you set a rotation, the aero really won't help you. You need, or you might not be able to, like obviously here I can just like crank the rear wing and also drop the rear end. And that's a different video coming up, by the way, the aero balance and how to work with that. So get subscribed, guys, get subscribed. So we have that sorted as well. So I can obviously do that to get the aero far back, but then I won't be able to go through the rest of the corners around this track because it requires so much front end grip. So this balance kind of act that we have to compromise and make decisions that will last you perhaps a 24-hour race. Like you'll be able, like Lecumbe here, or quite a lot of issues being sideways out of corners because of traction. That corner is quite tricky in terms of that, or those corners I should say. But like this kind of like going a little bit too aggressive out of this corner here, or like losing traction here as I'm just casually drifting around, it won't kill you. But that sudden snap in Blanchimont, that will definitely kill you. Let's see if I can go in and recreate one of those spins, just to show you guys how it looks. So minimum, let's go to minimum diff and see how it goes. Nothing else changes. By the way, coming out of the pits here. So, yeah, let's do that again. But so it was more tricky to rotate the car. You see how it doesn't so easily rotate around you as if you have a way more stiff diff, because then it just like does like that. And also let's see how it behaves in some other corners. So same corners here. Pressures are lower, that should be noted. But just which means that I should have less grip, but still like full throttle around here. I almost can't get the back end to step out. Coming in here, it just feels less secure, you know? As the car doesn't settle down so much. Right, so coming up to Blanchimont, we're at optimum tire temps, or not tire temps, tire pressures. Temps should be decent. So let's go flat, see how the Bentley behaves. Okay, actually quite decent. So I guess I have quite a bit of rear end aero. Let's try Rouge and Radio. Alright, let's see how this goes. So, lowest possible diff. I did not try to make that happen. I wasn't holding back, but I did not try to make that happen. So, that just proves the point, right? And there you go. And that's how a low diff can make you feel. Right, so to summarize then, the differential allows for different rotations on the rear tires, but it can also limit the amount of rotation as the inside tire goes slower through a corner and so on. If you have a low diff, you will spin one tire and sacrifice that tire, but you will have some grip sideways. If you have a very stiff diff, you will spin up both the rear tires coming out of slow corners if obviously your traction control or like your throttle application isn't good enough, and you'll spin both tires, so you will have a slide. However, when you go quickly through corners, if you have a stiffer diff, you'll be more limited coming into the corners in terms of rotation, but in some ways that can be good, especially like in this situation where we don't want the car to just like snap on itself, do the Bentley as we call it in between me and my friends. So just having that, as I said before, the yaw moment, the limiting yaw moment, because when the car starts to rotate like that, outside tire is gonna rotate quicker, but the diff will limit that and keep the rear end a bit calmer. So I hope you enjoyed this. The differential is a tricky topic. I hope this shines some light on what you're trying to achieve with your setups and so on. Give me comments. Leave a comment below. Pro YouTuber. And let me know what to do next. I have a suggestion on doing aero balance, which I'm looking forward to, because that is a very interesting topic and it's more complicated than you think. Of course it is. Everything is more complicated than that. But yeah, in the meantime, have a nice evening, day, or whatever you are in the world, and see you next time. Bye-bye.